Thank you. It's great to be here. I got up this morning and left at 6:30 to go over the mountain in the snow. So I went through the sleet and snow to be with you. And I know it's worth it because it's very inspiring to see people who even just be this cold for this long. And somebody asked at lunch, why do you think this movement is growing? Well, it's because of this kind of fortitude. So about 30 years ago, when I first moved to California, I lived about a mile up the road, and I realized that I could pursue an interest in horticulture at Foothill College. So this is a return for me. And it was only $3 a quarter. Amazing. And I reveled in that course and loved focusing on the plants. But I was uncomfortable frequently, and I didn't really understand why. Figuring out why has kind of been the work of my adult life. When I also started working at Yerba Buena Nursery while I was going to school here. So in my design class, I asked if I could use native plants. And I was told that it would not be a good idea. I should not use native plants because they co-evolved with the local pests around here. It would be far better to use plants from elsewhere that had no relationship with this fauna. And it seemed to me that would be a lonely garden, almost a painted landscape. And of course, the opposite of the topic of my talk, habitat gardening, but somehow it's not a title that I don't know why I find that difficult. But anyway, so I decided to call it more frequently backyard restoration gardening because you can call it BRG, which sounds like something official that might get popular. BRG. Anyway, I wanted to start with actually some thoughts instead of just plunging into my slideshow. I loved your slideshow, Bernard, and if someone has to build in those beautiful mountains, I'm glad it's you. I've seen others. I've seen what can happen in them, and that was really inspiring. I wanted to start with a quote from Aldo Leopold. In about 1939, he wrote, "In a surprising number of people, there burns a curiosity about machines and loving care in their construction, maintenance, and use. This bent for mechanisms, even though clothed in greasy overalls, is often the pure fire of intellect. It is the earmark of our time, this is well known. But what few realize is that an equal bent for the mechanisms of nature is a possible earmark of some future generation." And I think that generation is us. For a number of reasons. There are geniuses in every field now, in entomology, in fish studies, in soil science, everywhere you look. And I wanted to talk about briefly one named Thomas Eisner, who is a professor at Cornell University, and wrote a book called For Love of Insects. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but if you have a small garden and you feel maybe sometimes wistful, as I felt while looking at the Bernard plant garden, there's plenty going on in even the smallest urban garden, and you will, if you read Thomas Eisner, you'll see that. Because he's using all these modern tools, basically it's chemical ecology, to figure out what's going on with insects on the minutest level. And it's absolutely mind-blowing. But I think for our purposes, one of the most important things I learned from him is that, yes, you may see birds and insects using non-native plants, nectaring on non-native flowers, but you can only be sure that they're really getting what they need when they're using natives. And in some cases this is known, in other cases it's not known about, but I would assume that there's a lot going on, and the safest way to best further the life events of all these species by using the plants they co-evolved with. In this regard, I prefer to start on a piece of land, approaching it from a backyard restoration standpoint. That is, by figuring out what once was there and then working with those plants in a way that will be very back and forth between you and the plants in your land. And then seeing what comes in and how you can enhance that, rather than starting with the idea that you want to have a butterfly garden or a bee garden or a hummingbird garden, because you can get into trouble that way. And a couple of examples are that I have customers who want to buy milkweed seed from me and live in foggy coastal areas, but they want to foster the monarchs that they're worried about because they're removing some eucalyptus. But that could turn into what they call a population sink, because cold, foggy places aren't really good for baby monarchs to awaken to the world and thrive. The pitfall that I frequently encounter, which is wanting to foster the success of one plant, so planting a scourge, like fennel, because it is a host plant for the Anna's swallowtail, as are many other beautiful native species, obviously. And fennel is now taking over the world from here up to Oregon. I haven't gone further than that, but I'm sure it's up to Washington State, and I know it is. You could be planting Heracleum lunatum or Corydorydia or many other plants. And also, if you start to plan your garden and make a plant palette from one or two plant communities, you'll have the advantage that those species have evolved under the same conditions. So if it's hot and dry, they will have baby, small, tiny, tough leaves. So if it's shady and wet, they'll be more likely to have large, inflexible leaves. And so there's a natural harmoniousness that will exist, which would be a great relief in our California gardens, because I think one of the things I see so frequently is a yucca plant next to a fern, next to a Colorado blue spruce, next to what would be the most disgusting thing I could do. So I would love to see that change. We were discussing, I wanted to say about foothill colleges. Now that department that I was talking about was called the Department of Ornamental Horticulture. And now that department is called Environmental Horticulture. So Foothill is part of this change, and I'm very proud of them for doing so. And we have many green courses and you can specialize in designing native plants now, so wow. And I would say that in my own business, I don't have to stand right here, it reflects some of this change. I've always thought it was fun to have mottos or slogans for my business because, I can, I'm the boss. So one of my first ones was, a plant is not a couch. And it was kind of obscure, but it was expressing a frustration I was having with some landscaping clients who wanted a plant to be a fixed feature, always the same color, always just a constant, impermanent, and permanent. So I was kind of trying to nudge them into a realization that a plant is not a couch, but then I started to learn the plant is a couch, because like for many birds, if they sleep on them, they lie on them, they eat as plate, it's a kitchen, it's a bed, so I had to let go of that slogan. I've had so many, but the next one, I think I have to have it written down because there have been so many. What was the next one? Oh yeah, biodiversity through native plants. But the word biodiversity is already becoming, blah. So I recently returned to our clients and asked them. So we had a motto contest for a T-shirt for Larner Seeds, and we got hundreds and hundreds of responses. It became a great way to not work. Oh, I have to look through the mottos. So I just want to read you a few. They sort of fell into different categories. Like this one I call inspirational. Wild hope, cultivating wonder, abide in native wisdom, coming home, gardening with the wild heart, plant natives, California riches. Then there were ones that were sort of blowing our horn, like restoring California one seed at a time. It's kind of exhausting thought. And then there were puns and rhymes, mostly having to do with. It's always good. You always want to stop in the middle of the talk so you can evaluate what you said and maybe apologize. Okay. So, I was reading these mottos. Please take your seats. So, another group was based on, I was telling you, puns and rhymes having to do with greedy and seedy. Native plant lovers never die, they just go to seeds. Caution, seedy individual. That's a favorite of our office manager. I don't know why. And some were favored they thought it should be in Latin, like patria ires, go, which means go native. In natives we trust. Seed the day instead of carpe diem. Seeds today, wildflowers for tomorrow. So the hardest ones were the ones they wanted to say something about habitat building, which is very difficult to convey on a T-shirt. But food, beauty, habitat. Beauty for our eyes, food for wildlife, satisfying to the soul. A bit too long, but nice, good sentiment. And some were based on The Sound of Music. She suggested the hills are alive with my face instead of Julie Andrews. Natives never sleep, natives have more fun. And some were threatening, like the natives are restless, and plant Larner seeds or die. And then there were some, based on commercial songs, or like the got ones, like got wildflowers, got quail, got habitat, got Forbes. Sow it with natives, instead of say it with flowers. Wildflowers, the gift that keeps on giving. And the winner we have not announced yet, but we have chosen her. And so now we'll get to the slides. And there is always inevitable duplication in conferences, but I'll go pretty fast through the ones that you've seen before. This is the coastal form of the California poppy, and it sort of symbolizes where we started, which was when I began to realize that the orange poppy wasn't the poppy that had originally grown where we lived, and I started ruthlessly pulling it out and restoring this one, and I didn't know much about it, but it turns out that it's a much longer-lived perennial with many other positive attributes, besides this obvious, incredible beauty. I never get tired of it. It's a bumblebee